Hi, friends. Cameron Presley here from Small Batch Solutions. In today's episode, I thought I'd build up from some of the concepts we talked about last time and show you how to build your very own node tool. But first, you might be thinking, Cameron, what do you mean by node tool? I'm familiar with NPM packages, I'm familiar with NPM libraries, but I'm not very familiar with what NPM tools or node tools are. Well, let me give you a couple examples. For first and foremost, when I'm saying a tool, I'm talking about a utility that you can install either globally or as part of a project that lets you accomplish some other tasks, but usually through a CLI, not necessarily through your project itself. For example, if you come from a .NET background, you're very familiar with some of the .NET tools like Entity Framework or maybe even the AWS helper functions. An example that I like to use a ton in the Node ecosystem is a package called gitignore. So to install it, you literally do npm install -g for global gitignore. And once you install it, it allows you to auto create gitignore files based on project type. So you can say gitignore, for example, node, give it a second, and it'll spit out a gitignore file that is specialized for Node, and this comes from a GitHub repo that has a list of like gold standard gitignores. Super helpful, right? I wouldn't necessarily maybe use this tool as part of my like NPM project, but super duper helpful when scaffolding a new project, especially for someone like me who jumps between different languages. Knowing that I can just say gitignore.net or gitignore node or gitignore Haskell, super helpful. I'm going to show you how to build a version of this today, but starting really simple by just building something that does basic greeting. So let's begin. First things first, we've got to make a directory. So we're going to say mkdir source, and we need to initialize this as a project. So npm init --yes, get some defaults, give that a second there, all done. And we're going to install some tools. So we're going to install TypeScript, and I'm going to skip over the testing because you kind of already saw that in the previous video, so I'm not going to go over that again. But we are going to need TypeScript for sure. Honestly, I think that's all we need for today. So we're going to do --save dev because these are dev dependencies. Give that a moment to run. Yep. So we've got TypeScript set up. Now we need to configure it. So same thing as before, npx ts-jest for the TypeScript compiler, --init. Gives us some defaults there. Yeah, so let's go ahead and update our tsconfig.json. And really what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of a lot of these comments and figure out what's up with this red squiggly. Yeah. So we will fix that in a minute. So we're going to get rid of all of this stuff. Now, in the upcoming version of TypeScript, they actually got rid of all this boilerplate. So going forward, it won't generate all of this. Honestly, I'm not sure how to feel about that because on one hand, I like the discoverability of it, but on the other, not so much. So we're just going to get rid of all of that, all of that. Get rid of all of these. The nice things too is that you could always like figure this stuff out, right? So I can come down here, do dot or double quote, and I get all these options. So it's not like I couldn't get any discoverability. Just going to clean up some more of these white spaces here. Don't need that. Don't need any of these. You may want to turn these on later, but for what we're doing, we don't need them. Format the file to get rid of some blank lines. Cool. So you may have noticed that we didn't install TS Node, and that's what we used last time, which the reason why is because if we're going to build a tool that's going to be used on other people's machines, NPM and Node are expecting it to be JavaScript. So we can't use TS Node. We actually have to compile it. And to make that work, we got to turn on two more compiler options. The first, and I like to put them up top. First one is the root directory. And this is essentially saying, hey, where should I be looking for my TypeScript? And we're going to say it's going to be in the source directory. The other one is the out directory. And this is essentially saying, hey, where do you want me to put all this compiled code at? And we're going to put that in a folder called dist. Now, you'll also see bin as an example for binary. I like dist as distributable or distribution. This is the code that we're passing out. I'll go ahead and warn you, if you don't set an out directory and go to compile this, it actually just shoves the JavaScript next to your TypeScript, and it's really gross. It's hard to kind of futz with that. So you definitely want to make sure you set an out directory. But we've got that going, so let's go ahead and create our first TypeScript file, index.ts as is tradition, and we're just going to do a very basic function called greet. It's a void function, and it's just going to do console log hello. All right, and we can go ahead and test this out a little bit. So let's go to our command line, and I'm going to type in npx ts-c because we're going to invoke the TypeScript compiler here. And if everything works correctly, we should get a dist folder. And we do. And if I expand that, it has a single index.js file. If I click on that, hey, looks correct to me, right? Looks like everything's like set up. So much so, in fact, that if we go back to our command line and do node source, dist index, it doesn't print out anything. That's because we forgot to call greet. So let's fix that. Call the greet function. We'll compile our code again. Give that a second. And then we'll run it. And now we get hello printed. Awesome. This works, but there's a small bug. And I'll show you what it is. Let's say this project gets more complicated, right? And so we need another file. So we'll say something .ts function called horribly inefficient. And it's like just super bad code here. And this gets committed, right? So much so that at some point we actually end up compiling this thing. Give that a second there. And now we have a something.js file, right? So it's here, it's being bundled, it's all part of it. Now I come back and let's say we get rid of something.ts because we come to our senses and realize, oh, we don't need that. So we delete it. So we delete it and we compile our code again. So we compiled, but note this something.js file still hanging out. Well, that's kind of the problem. When we do ts-c to compile, it doesn't clear out the dist folder first. So we need to do that. Now, one way we could do that is we could always do rm dist, and that would work, but I'm on a Windows machine, right? So unless I'm using git bash or WSL, that's not going to work. And if I were to do something like rmdir or remove item, those are all windowy commands. That's not going to work on other platforms. So we need a OS agnostic way of doing that. One library that we can use is called rimwraf, and we're going to install that. So I'm going to do npm install save dev rimwraf. And what this is, it's actually an OS agnostic implementation of the RM tool from the Linux world. Pretty neat, very powerful. We're only going to barely scratch the surface of using this tool, but I'll show you how it works. We can literally call npx rimwraf dist, let that run, and knows how our dist folder is gone. So now we can then say npx ts-c. It compiles and we have our dist folder and it's only index.js. I don't know about you, but always having to remember to do npx rimwraf dist and then run npx ts-c is going to get really annoying really fast. So let's write a package JSON script to help us out. I'm going to come down here, go and go to our scripts, call this script our build, and this is going to say rimwraf dist because we want you to remove that, and then run ts-c. And let's see if that works. npm run build. Assuming I haven't mistyped something. Seems to work like a top. So far so good. The next step we got to do though is we've got our distribution, but we need to actually bundle this up into a package. So let's go and do that. We'll say there's already a built-in command to help us out called npm pack, and we can run this. So if we run npm pack and give it a second, it'll spit out a tarball. And this tarball has a couple of files in there that'll help us out with our code. And we can even try to execute it. So if I do npx greet, right, it kind of fails because it says, hey, wait a minute, I couldn't find an executable to run. And that's because it's just an index file. There's nothing that says, hey, here's what to execute. So let's fix that. To do that, we're going to go to our package.json and we're going to put in a new property called bin, stands for binary. And we're going to say when someone calls the greet command, we want you to run the index.js file out of the dist folder. We'll save that file, come in here. We'll do npm run build again because we have to now do a new build. Then we need to call pack, make sure we get our tarball recreated. Sure do. And now we're going to run that npx command again. We'll get prompted to say, hey, do you really want to run this? And I'm like, yeah, I trust the person who wrote it. Hit Y. And we don't get that error message anymore, but look at this. We got brought over to our JS file. It didn't run anything. Well, that's odd. Why did it do that? Well, I'll go ahead and tell you. So we told it in our package.json file, hey, your executable is this file. But it doesn't actually know how to run that. So we've got to somehow tell npx that, hey, this file needs to be ran in the node context. And we can do that by introducing what is called a shebang. Now, if you're from the Linux world, this makes all the sense in the world. But if you're like me, whose primary background is Windows, you're just thinking like a shebang, what's that? Well, it starts with a hashtag, or so that's where the sh of shebang comes from. Then an exclamation point, or the bang. So that's how shebang comes into being. And we're going to say in the user bin env folder, here's the node executable that should be ran. We'll save the file. Come back up here, do another build. Pack, because we need to rebuild out our binary. And we will do the greet. Give that a second. Yep, sure to proceed. And we get hello printed. Awesome. So notice how it didn't pull us back in index.js, and notice how it actually ran. That shebang is what helps us. And I can go and tell you, as somebody who's made a couple of these packages, I usually forget this step. That's usually what bites me in the butt. So we're almost done, actually. The one last thing I'm going to do real quick before we actually show how this works full bore is I'm going to go back to our package.json, and I'm going to give us a new script. And I'm going to call this make package, because I'm tired of doing npm run build and then npm pack. That's really annoying. So I'm just going to combine those two things. And we can verify that's working by calling npm run make package. Give that a second. Yeah, looks like the rimraf worked, and we've got our new tarball, so that's all good. And then I'm going to make one more. I'm going to call this one dry run. And what this does is I want you to run npm run make package. And then I want you to actually execute that tarball. So in this case, we can do greet-1.o.o.tgz. Oh. And then hit comma at the end of the line. And now I'm going to say npm run dry run. So that should build our package, creates the tarball, and should be executing it, which it just did. Cool. Let's install this globally and see if everything works. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say npm install -g for globally, that tarball we just created. Hit enter, give it a second. Looks like it added the package. So now if I type in greet and hit enter, we get our hello. That's pretty cool, right? We went from literally nothing to now having a very basic command line utility that we can use to do all sorts of things. It could be scaffolding your own files. It could be maybe a better way of interacting with some of your libraries on the CLI. You know, world's kind of your oyster here, so definitely recommend trying it out. And with that, that kind of concludes this video. Hopefully you learned something new, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Until then.